But when the economy is collapsing, no one benefits. And so they are trying to learn all the tricks that Japan used to keep the GDP from falling. I wrote 2 English books. One of the earlier ones basically described this whole process, and that was actually read by very many Chinese officials. And when I meet them, I say, "Oh, you are Richard Koo, I read your book." So they are all studying how to keep the GDP from falling the Japanese way. And because there is no Milton Friedman or Krugman, who just got some crazy award, those people who argue for monetary policy are not in China, which means they can move very quickly to whatever policy that's needed. And given that the country is not democratic, the policymakers can go very quickly. My sense is that even though China is facing a massive danger of balance sheet recession, they are likely to put necessary policies probably faster than Americans or Europeans by learning from the Japanese example. So I think they're going to put in fiscal stimulus so that even though the economy might not be growing this way, it will be growing, it won't be coming down like that. So that's China. They're going to have a lot of problems going forward because bubble bursting is a very, very painful experience. We learn in Japan, Americans will face that very soon, and the Chinese will face that as well. So I hope that this government in Taiwan will not depend too much on Chinese economy going forward, because they're not going to be able to provide much stimulus as it used to. As I indicated to you earlier, the Toyota textile order is down to 0. And we might see something like that, or some companies here may be facing similar predicament as Chinese exports to US slow down, Chinese domestic demand also weakens for all sorts of balance sheet reasons. So what can we do, Japan and Taiwan, for example? I think what we can do best is, first of all, this problem is started somewhere else. There's nothing wrong with the Taiwanese banks, nothing wrong with the Japanese banks, but we are all in trouble. But that's not something we can do much about here. We can only possibly prepare another capital injection if it's necessary, just to keep our banks from getting into bigger trouble. And I understand that the current government is putting together funds so that that kind of capital injection will be done if it's necessary. And the Japanese government is preparing the similar funds as well. But what is more important, I think, is to put together economic stimulus package. I think this island is still very much export dependent, and with the foreign demand in Europe, in China, in the United States, and maybe even in Japan falling, I think government should do everything in its power to keep the living standard of the people here. And that will require domestic demand stimulus measures. Now, I don't know what will be the best way to go about it. Maybe in Taiwan, tax cut will work better than spending. Or maybe spending will work better than tax cut. But I think government here should seriously consider those measures instead of just meddling in the stock market. I understand that government is doing a lot in the stock market, but if the economy is doing poorly and corporate profits are not going to look better in the near future, even if your government is in there trying to buy stocks, it might not do very well. If you look at the past history of government supporting the stock market, it worked in only one instance throughout history. And that one instance is the case for Hong Kong in 1997, 1998. When there's a Asian currency crisis, the Hong Kong stock market also collapsed, but the government went in there, bought up the stocks, and the stock market actually recovered. And for the longer term, however, if the selling is happening because foreign financial institutions have to repatriate the money back to their countries, if that's the reason most of the selling is happening, then those of you here in Taiwan today, and if you are willing to take a long-term view, the Taiwan economy is still fundamentally strong, then this may be the opportunity to buy the stocks back from those foreigners cheaply. Of course, you have to look at the companies, you have to look at the prospects, the technology, the cash flow, and all of that. But there's some, in all of Asia, there are a lot of foreign monies that came in over the years. And now they're going back. And if that's the case, it's a chance for Taiwanese to buy Taiwanese companies back cheaply. Now, the recovery will not be very quick. It might take a long time. But if you are willing and able to take a long-term view, then you should be looking at opportunities very closely, especially if the kind of measures that I talked about in the United States, capital injection, which is already on its way, and fiscal stimulus measures, if those two seems like it's going to happen, then maybe you should look into the markets again in the United States as well as here. But before that, well, I must say, be careful. And survival should be your first priority. Beyond that, for what I described to you here, look for the opportunities, but opportunities, the long-term opportunities. Short-term, well, you have nothing better to do. Of course, you can play the market in the short run. But for the economy to fully recover from, the world economy to fully recover from this, it's going to take at least a couple of years. It's not going to happen tomorrow or next year. Thank you very much.
感谢吴长明先生的精彩的演讲。我想刚刚的这席话呢，我们上了一场非常珍贵的，从金融海啸的过程，刚刚他讲的3个途径，包括政府的公共支出，另外一个包括减税，另外一个是降息。那3个当中那么顾先生认为现在政府采取这个政府支出效果会比较宏大。那我想顾先生今天把所有最要紧的问题呢，都跟大家做了一个一一的解答，包括美国的问题、日本的问题、欧洲的问题，到中国、到台湾呢所要面对的问题，我们大概都了然于胸。今天我们再一次以最热烈掌声来感谢我们顾昌明先生的演讲。那么将来有机会的话呢，我们希望每一年最少一次呢，我们邀请顾先生回到台湾，把他的研究来跟我们一起分享。谢谢大家。